Good evening and welcome to Wigan's virtual council meeting. My name is Councillor Steve Dauber and I'm the Mayor of Wigan. For members' information, this meeting is being live streamed, so please mute your microphone and turn off your video when not speaking to minimise background noise and distractions. Should you wish to speak on an item, then please indicate this by using the chat facility and type in speak RS, and then wait until I invite you to speak. At that point, unmute your microphone and put your video on. Can I emphasise that the chat facility must not be used for private conversations between councillors and officers, and I will not take any inappropriate comments from the chat facility this evening, and so please only use speak RS and then I will bring you in at the relevant point. You can of course also use the chat function to signify that you are against an item which is on the agenda by typing against or A. I will also request the officers who are administering the meeting to mute any member who may disregard the rules if I feel that this is necessary, and any unnecessary interruptions will not be tolerated. Those same officers may use the chat facility to communicate with me regarding the workings of the meeting. Democratic services will be timing the speeches, and if you are nearing your allotted time, then a message will be placed in the chat facility to give you a minute's warning. Please state your name for the audience before you speak, unless I have just mentioned your name. You will have been sent a separate etiquette sheet to help with the smooth running of this meeting, and could we please keep to that process? Should I lose a Wi-Fi signal for any reason, then may I suggest that the Deputy Mayor continues to take the item until I am reconnected. If any other members lose connection, then members should try to re-establish their connections, but we need to ensure that the meeting continues without delay. I also need to stress the correct use of the following rules. 11.12 Points of order. A member may at any time raise a point of order relating only to an alleged breach of these council rules of procedure or the law. The member must indicate the rule or law and the way in which he or she considers it has been breached, and as Mayor, I will hear the member immediately and my ruling on the matter will be final. Rule 11.13 Personal explanation. A member may at any time request myself as the Mayor to allow them to make a personal explanation relating only to some material part of an earlier speech by that member which may appear to have been misunderstood in the present debate. My ruling on the admissibility of a personal explanation will be final. Unfortunately, we have technical problems with the pre-recorded prayer that we normally have, and so we'll move straight on to the meeting. Can I remind members of the need to respect each other, and I will continue to chair these meetings fairly and to show impartiality. The rulings of conduct for the meeting have been circulated by email to all members, and a copy are in your ModernGov app library section. And ask the Chief Executive, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do. We have apologies from Councillor Bill Clark and apologies from Councillor Shirley Dewhurst. Are there any further apologies? I think that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The minutes of the meeting held on 21st of October 2020. I will move the acceptance of these as a correct record. Leader, do you wish to second?
Wish to second, Mr. Mayor.
Can I put the minutes to the vote? All those against the approval of the minutes, please show in the chat facility. I don't have any against, and so those minutes are accepted. Mayor's announcements. Death of Honorary Freeman, Dr. Kate Fussell. It is with deep regret that I refer to the death on the 23rd of November 2020 of Honorary Freeman, Dr. Kate Fussell. Kate was appointed an Honorary Freeman on the 6th of December 2000, and more recently she was honoured with a star on Believe Square in recognition of her making history as being Wigan's first female surgeon. She had dedicated 20 years of her professional life as a consultant surgeon general at Royal Albert Edward Infirmary and was a great role model for younger generations. The council were proud to see such achievements in our town, and it is only fitting that her career was officially recognised in this way. Funeral service will be held on Monday the 21st of December at 11 AM at Wigan Crematorium. The numbers at the crematorium are strictly limited, but I've been invited, so I will be attending. There will also be a live link for members who also wish to attend. Do any members wish to speak on this? Councillor Mullinex.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure whether I should actually declare a personal interest because Kate scarred me for life in 1987 when she took my appendix out on Christmas Day. So I certainly have the first-hand knowledge of Kate's ability and work, and I think she was just such an excellent person and certainly a champion for the women's cause in terms of being the first consultant at Wigan Infirmary. Kate was a character, and I think many people who attended the star ceremony will remember some of Kate's comments, which were certainly interesting to say the least. And she'll be sadly missed. I know that her friends, she had a lot of very close friends, will miss Kate. And certainly we have lost a great champion for women's rights and this borough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I have written to those closest to Kate to extend the council's deepest sympathy. At this point, may I ask for a minute's silence to show a mark of respect for Honorary Freeman, Dr. Kate Fussell. Thank you. The Great British Northwest Kerr Awards 2020, finalist Donna Edwards. May I congratulate Donna Edwards on reaching the final of the Great British Kerr Awards 2020 in the Northwest region. Donna is one of Bridgewater Day Kerr's support workers and has been shortlisted for the Dignity in Kerr Award. On behalf of the council, may I congratulate Donna on reaching the final, with the results being announced in April 2021. Lee Centurion's promotion to the Super League. It gives me great pleasure to announce that Lee Centurions have been promoted as the 12th Betfred Super League club for the 2021 season, which commences in March. The club will replace Toronto Wolfpack. May I, on behalf of the council, wish the team all the best for the season. Declarations of interest. The monitoring officer has provided advice to all members and relevant guidance has been issued. Members are asked to consider relevant interests for the purpose of this meeting, and if there are any interests, members must leave the meeting, if necessary, during the relevant item and rejoin after the item has been considered. Please email any declarations to the Democratic Services Manager so that the minutes can be updated accordingly. The morality. This item has now been deferred until the council meeting to be held on the 3rd of March 2021. Update from Cabinet portfolio holders. I invite the Deputy Leader and Portfolio Holder for Adult Social Care, Councillor Cunliffe, to speak about those people in the care sector who have gone above and beyond over the last 9 months. Councillor Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we can all agree as we reach the end of 2020 that it's been an unprecedented year in all of our lifetimes. And for 9 months, we've been in the series of restrictions and lockdowns and everything else. And so, speaking from my health and care portfolio, I think it's important that I personally and we as a council express our thanks to all those people working in health and care over the last 9 months. I mean, we thank them all the time for everything they do, but in the last 9 months, they've been working under extreme pressure and stress. The doctors and nurses at the hospital have been under severe stress for a long period of time. And even now in the second wave, it's only just starting to relieve a little as we reduce the number of transmissions of infection. And possibly we face another third wave, perhaps in January or February. So for the work they've been doing, I think there are thousands of people in this borough who work in health and care. And it's important, I think, that we register the council's thanks for those people for what they've been doing. And it's not just the doctors and nurses at the hospital, all those other people who've been going in, porters, domestics, all those other staff, ancillary staff, but not just the hospital. In the first wave, the care homes were particularly badly affected. And we've seen over 200 deaths of residents of our care homes. And these people who work in the care homes in the borough, who work in home care, who work supporting people in supported living service, were going into work. And if you think back to April and May, when we had a position where nearly 1,000 people a day were dying of COVID-19, then these people were going in and putting themselves and their families at risk to care for our most vulnerable people that we have in our community. And I worked as a nurse in the NHS for 40 years. My daughter herself, a health visitor, volunteered to work on the COVID ward. And I know the tremendous trauma of seeing your patients die, not being able to do anything to help them and just to try and relieve them through that last final period. And the tremendous impact, not only in terms of physical exhaustion through that, but also the mental exhaustion and the impact that that has. And when I think of all those care workers in our care homes, many of them on low pay, doing that on a regular basis, this town owes a great debt of gratitude to those carers in health and care in this borough, the thousands of people who have done that. And so I'd formally like to register the council's thanks and appreciation for everything that they do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you. I now invite the portfolio holder for planning, environmental services and transport, Councillor Prescott, to speak about Safe Streets, Saves Lives, zebra crossings. Councillor Prescott.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. Mr. Mayor, as you will be aware, during the pandemic, we've seen a marked increase in walking and cycling in the borough, which has played and is playing an increasingly important role in essential journeys made. The Safer Streets Saves Lives initiative is designed to help people to stay safe, and while helping communities to thrive during the present pandemic. As part of this, we are supporting the Safer Streets initiative by implementing such measures that will give pedestrians and cyclists more space to be safer when travelling, be that by walking or by cycling, and thereby encouraging more people to walk or cycle throughout the borough. Funding from the Mayor of Greater Manchester's Fund has been made available to GM authorities to introduce measures that will allow them to support people to walk and cycle. Wigan Council's approach to utilising the funding has been to introduce measures that create permanent improvements and solutions that will allow residents to increase their use of walking and cycling to access work, schools, local town centres, as well as for leisure. As part of the project, we have introduced several new pedestrian crossings on routes to schools, which will enable more walking and cycling and will also improve road safety. Those locations are as follows: Old Lane, Shevington, that would be near to St Bernadette's Catholic Primary. The new crossing provides a pedestrian crossing at a point on the A577 Addington Road from a residential area onto Thomas Street, which leads to Hindley Green Community Primary School. And currently under construction on the A577 Mossley Common Road, there will be another pedestrian crossing that will provide a safe crossing on the A577 directly outside St John's Mossley Common C of E Infant School. So, Mr Mayor, Wigan Council supports the Safer Street Saves Lives initiative, and by doing so we are supporting people's right to walk or cycle more, while undertaking such measures that will help to keep the streets of the borough safer. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Prescott. I now invite the portfolio holder for children and families, Councillor Bullen, to speak about the Ofsted assurance visit and the response of our schools and colleges during the pandemic. Councillor Bullen.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, for inviting me to speak. Following an Ofsted assurance visit to our Children's Social Service Directorate in October, the final letter published on the 20th of November confirmed that we know our services well. No additional priority areas for development were reported other than those we'd already stated in our self-assessment. Ofsted recognised the recent progress made by the Director of Children's Services and the impact of the pandemic response on the pace of the improvement journey. We accept that there is a job to do and we're committed to that improvement pathway. Mr Mayor, about our schools. Our schools have continued in their heroic efforts over the last term to support students in their classrooms and through remote learning. They are doing an immensely difficult but incredible job. The disruption to attendance since March this year has been phenomenal. Full lockdown, partial return in June, the summer break, and an autumn term with significant sickness and self-isolation absences. The impact is yet to be measured in terms of pupils' learning and the effect particularly on students who are due to sit exams next year. The government has recently suggested proposals to make adjustments to some exams and assessments. We await further detail on this in the new year. It is a very anxious time for our young people and our schools. We have grave concerns about the potential unfairness of these latest proposals. If generous marking is not given a regional or local weighting, it means that the disadvantage gap, which was already widening pre-pandemic, will just widen further, and this will create inequality of opportunity for many of our Wigan young people. This is why we are striving to give the Wigan and GM perspective, and we're lobbying hard for a fairer deal. Mr Mayor, it is difficult to equate these proposed arrangements with the levelling up agenda of which the government boasts. Furthermore, many of our Wigan families are feeling additional pressure. It was inconceivable that the government refused initially to provide free school meals during the October half term. It took a campaign by a talented young footballer from Wythenshawe and a massive public outcry for them to make a U-turn. In Wigan, we didn't wait for them to do the right thing. We made sure 10,000 children did not go hungry during the October school holiday by providing vouchers for families. Mr. Mayor, may I offer to each and every one of our early years settings, primary and special schools, high schools and sixth form colleges, a huge thank you for all that they have done and continue to do during the pandemic. The commitment they've shown to making their settings COVID safe and placing the welfare and well-being of our children and young people at their very heart. Finally, I would like to thank our council staff teams in education, special educational needs, social care and public health, who have supported them throughout. Our schools and colleges say we couldn't have done it without you, which I think says it all for the services we provide in Wigan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I now invite the portfolio holder for communities, public relations, corporate land, community assets and culture, Councillor Reedy, to speak about how culture has changed our high streets for the better. Councillor Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for allowing me to speak. Since March, Mr. Mayor, people have been affected all over the world in a bad way, and the impact on local people has been devastating because of COVID. So I wanted to bring some good news in this statement, and this statement is quite timely, with the leader announcing our preferred partner for the galleries starting in 2022. In our 2030 programme, residents told us how important culture was, and this came loud and clear from our young people. They also told us how important our town centre was. Our deal for the future said that residents want a vibrant town centre, access to better employment and skills, and good health and well-being. 18 months ago, we launched our ambitious 5-year plan to develop culture and deliver this through our objectives with the borough's cultural manifesto, The Fire Within. This was agreed by Cabinet and this council. Mr. Mayor, town centre shopping will never be the same again, mainly because of the digital world we live in. Online shopping is more popular than it has ever been before. So what do? Do we sit back? Do we sit back and mourn, or do we change the way that we work? Shopping needs to be an experience for the whole family, which is encompasses in the work that we are doing in the Believe in Lee campaign and the new galleries project. We have provided community outlets across the borough, and we need more, and we will provide more. Niche shops are needed where people can't get things online, and we need people to encourage that. And one of the things I know the leader is quite keen on with apprenticeships, but also encouraging local entrepreneurs. We need them people to flourish in our borough. All town centres across the world are struggling. So what is different about Wigan? We had a vision before COVID, so we don't blame everything on COVID. And once we return to normality, that vision will continue. So the message to the country is Wigan is open for business. It's bigger, it's better than it's ever been before. And our place is the place to visit. And I will really say about the C's, Mr. Mayor, culture, communities, collaboration, and that is our message going forward. The Fire Within and the Turnpike have been seen as groundbreaking projects, and I recognise all over the country for putting Wigan and Lee on the cultural map. By 2024, we will be recognised as one of the leading authorities for culture, creative contributions to our community cohesion and health and well-being and a quality of life. Who would have thought it for Wigan and Lee, but with her. Today, Mr. Mayor, and this is really important for people who question our kind of capacity of what we're doing. Since 18 months ago, when we introduced our cultural manifesto, we have brought in 3.1 million of external funding, and that's been brought in for culture across Wigan Borough through a combination of Arts Council grants and GM Culture grants, showing a massive return on our investment. And there's more bids in the pipeline coming up in the future, Mr. Mayor. The Fire Within Cultural Hub, we transformed a vacant shopping centre with empty units into a cultural hub, changed the perception of Wigan regionally and nationally, putting us on the cultural map for the first time in years across GM. This allowed us to attract funding and make bold plans. We have had 20,000 visitors from people all over the country, and the Fire Within has been visited by people who've never visited a museum before. The visit to the gallery are bucking the national trend with an increase of 12.6% at the launch. The Arts Council commented, "We are doing groundbreaking stuff." At the other side of the turnpike is seen as a community asset, offering exhibition space for local people, and the participation and footfall increases year upon year, and this is nationally recognised. We have supported over 40 artists and showcased their work, 3 exhibitions at the Fire Within and 37 local artists. Creative practitioner freelance grant would have otherwise had no support. This year we have engaged 3,000 young people and children from across the borough, and 50 schools have been engaged. What's next, Mr. Mayor? I suppose this is important. We've brought the grants in, we've applied for more, and now we're very near to the end of the National Lottery funded state-of-the-art Wigan and Lee Archives project, which will open in spring 2021. Further to that, taking place is work at Pennington Flash and Lee Sports Village. The Rugby League World Cup comes to the borough in 2021 and the Women's Euros in 2022. The Creative People's Bid, which have been submitted in 2021 to secure 1.8 million of Arts Council funding for cultural activities across Wigan Borough. Mr. Mayor, I conclude to say what is next. We want to support the Believe in Lee campaign and make that a thriving town centre, and make the Civic Square something to be proud of again, to support Lee and Wigan in Super League, to continue to support Wigan Athletic in the times of trouble.
Councillor, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. You've run out of your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you very much for that. Can I remind members that these reports are for information only and not for debate, so you can't ask questions. I now invite the portfolio holder for housing and welfare, Councillor Halliwell, to speak on heritage issues. Councillor Halliwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As some members will be aware, the council has been looking to draft a heritage strategy for adoption for the next municipal year. And the purpose of tonight's update from myself is to provide an overview of that historic environment strategy consultation report, and to summarise the implications for the strategy and set out the next steps proposed to finalise the strategy. Mr. Mayor, the public consultation ran between the 23rd of October to the 9th of November 2020 and was conducted online. The draft strategy and the draft historic environment strategy, I should say, was published alongside a survey, and this was supported by a communications campaign to encourage people to respond. There was a strong response, with a total of 442 responses received, and overall respondents were very positive about the strategy and agreed with the aims and the objectives and the proposed actions outlined in the document. 93% felt it was important to have a strategy, 95% agreed with the vision and the themes, and 90% felt that the actions captured the right priorities. So clearly, heritage has an aim for the borough's residents. Well, Mr. Mayor, our journey has already started. We've had successes with THI in Wigan. We've now won the bid for the Heritage Action Zone in King Street, and we've seen some improvements and refurbishment of the historic Lee Town Hall, which will open very shortly. Mr. Mayor, we've got something like 500 listed buildings, 23 conservation areas, 12 scheduled monuments and 1 registered garden. And it isn't just about polite architecture. For me, it's more about the vernacular architecture, the maintaining of our character in our streets, the vistas and views and the tone and grain that will be secured for the future generations. But we have to be a pragmatic advocate for the conservation of historic buildings and the environment. And to do that, we need to understand our historic environment, which drops into 4 main themes: the evidential value, its historic value, its aesthetic value, and its communal value. Mr. Mayor, conservation in essence is about managing change. It's about dealing with the dichotomies of obsolescence, gentrification and urban regeneration, not just within our town centres, but within our communities. And to that end, our historic strategy will try to address some of those over the future years. Mr. Mayor, the next steps, although no substantive changes are proposed to the strategy, it is proposed that in parallel to finalising the strategy, we will re-engage with those key stakeholders and interested groups, and we will demonstrate to them that we are taking feedback seriously regarding their communication, engagement and action. So over the coming months, we'll be publishing the report on the consultation. We will host an online feedback and a next step sessions with key stakeholders early in the next year. This will then go to the SNT, and then finally it will go to Cabinet for formal endorsement, which can then be sent to full council for agreement. Mr. Mayor, clearly the residents of this borough treasure the heritage we have, and we will do everything we can to support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I now invite the lead member, Equalities and Domestic Abuse, Councillor Wakefield, to speak on Wigan Council Public Sector Equality Duty Annual Report. Councillor Wakefield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak. Mr. Mayor, the UK is one of the most economically and socially unequal countries in the developed world. Inequality affects life chances, education, employment, health and life expectancy. Inequality is bad for society and is bad for our economy. You would expect our government to be at the forefront of tackling these inequalities, showing leadership and bringing our country together, especially in our time of crisis. But instead, this government has a terrible track record on equality. In fact, they have made it worse. We have a Prime Minister who thinks it's acceptable to use sexist, racist and homophobic language that whips up hate and discrimination, causing a rise in hate crimes. And rather than levelling up, they seem hell-bent on levelling us down.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Can we keep this to Wigan? Let's keep this to Wigan Council and not slandering government. This is ridiculous. It's political politics, this, and we can't respond and the Conservatives can't. Let's just keep it purely to Wigan, because people are watching from home and that's a disgrace, that behaviour. Thank you.
Can I ask you, Councillor Wakefield, to speak on the Wigan Council Public Sector Equality Duty Annual Report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Equality is political, and I am setting out with regards to the equality gender and then the equality commitment that we have in Wigan. So equalities has never been so high on the agenda. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted and exacerbated many inequalities that already exist in our society. The pre-existing social inequalities that this government created contributed to the UK recording the highest death rates from COVID in Europe. And if action is not taken, young people's lives will be permanently affected. The pandemic again has shown the Tories' lack of interest in equality. On one hand, they give the government contracts to their mates and waste millions of pounds on failed projects, and on the other hand, they voted against free school meals and giving the people of this borough what they need to survive a pandemic. And it's always like ours, the most vulnerable in our society, that suffer from the actions that this government takes.
Mr. Mayor, please, can we keep to the subject, please?
Yeah, Councillor Wakefield, can I ask you to speak on the Wigan Council Public Sector Equality Duty Annual Report? Does it say that in the report, please?
That's what.
Only what's included in the report.
This Labour Council takes equality seriously, and we will make sure that everyone in this borough feels welcome and supported, where everyone can thrive and diversity is celebrated. We have now published our Equality Commitment Report for 2020, which shows how we are delivering on this promise. The report shows how we are pushing the equality agenda in the Wigan Borough, how we are delivering on previous targets that we set, and what our future goals are. And I would urge everyone to read the report to truly understand the amazing work that is going on. At Wigan Council, our overarching strategy of the Deal 2030 puts equality and inclusivity at the heart of everything we do. We use our refreshed equality impact assessments whenever we consider new policy to make sure it does not disproportionately affect a protected characteristic. We are supporting local employment and apprenticeships. We are delivering specific homes for our older residents and have 2 new autism centres. We have been awarded the Gold Level Employer Recognition Award by the Ministry of Defence, and we have a new community resilience service to support social cohesion and address ASB. We were swift to react to the pandemic and had a plan of action to help our families, vulnerable residents and businesses, and we continue to provide free school meals after the government failed to deliver. We have also supported many online inclusion events like Black History Month, Transition and Beyond and Wigan Pride. Our Community Wealth Building Initiative has now also been developed to address the economic inequalities in the borough and create a fairer and more inclusive local economy. We have also adopted socio-economic disadvantage as an extra protected characteristic on our equality commitment. The opportunity to include this on the Equality Act was scrapped by the then Home Secretary Theresa May in 2010. At a time when the Equality and Human Rights Commission is calling on councils to adopt this duty, I am proud to say that we are already leading the way and are the first council in Greater Manchester to adopt this. Mr Mayor, we should be very proud of the work that this Labour Council has done this year and what we have managed to achieve against everything that has been thrown at us. Recent events have reminded us just how important our equality agenda is, more so now than ever before, and it will remain our top priority till we have that fair and inclusive borough where we all celebrate diversity and everyone can flourish. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand Councillor Winstanley would like to speak, but fortunately we can't speak on this issue, Councillor Winstanley. So at this point, I would like to invite the leader to sum up on the year. Leader.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, thank you to all my Cabinet members and lead members for their excellent presentations that they brought before the Council tonight. And just to pick up on that, because when we think about this year, somebody said to me, what a terrible day it is. Well, I think that terrible day started back in March and continued up to the present. And certainly I think what we've experienced in 2020, hopefully we will never experience again. And I certainly think the effort that's gone in from members of the council and from all our staff has been something special. And when you all also consider at the height of the pandemic, we had over 700 volunteers helping out in the community to help people in their daily lives. And that was something special, which I don't think has been replicated anywhere else in the country. I think what we've got to face up to is that 2021, as we start in 2021, may not be dissimilar to what we're experiencing now. So we need to be ready and aware of that. And as far away as the cavalry is coming over the hill as once described, and I'm not quite sure where we're up to with the penalty shootout, we do know that we've lots to look forward to, hopefully in 2021. And I certainly hope that things certainly improve for the people of this borough, and it is the aim of this council to make sure it does. We've got to make sure that we do not have that lost generation. We've got to make sure that young people get the best opportunities and best chances in life, and we certainly aim to do that with everything we can to make sure that that happens. What we need to also think at this time of the year, Mr Mayor, as we head into the Christmas period, we need to think about the 600 families, above 600 families, who will not have a loved one with them this Christmas because they've lost them early in their lives due to this coronavirus. And my thoughts and prayers go out to all those families who have certainly suffered this year, and certainly hope that they can cope, and certainly hope that things improve for them. What I would like to finish off with, Mr Mayor, and the Deputy Leader touched on it quite adequately, about our health workers, NHS health workers, and the frontline workers across this borough. And what I would like to announce tonight, Mr. Mayor, that when the time is right and circumstances allow, I intend that we will place 2 stars as a big thank you for all the work that these people have done during this vital time in 2020 and going forward into 2021. One of the stars will be in Believe Square and one will be in front of the Town Hall at Lee. I'm pleased to announce tonight this will be the first part of our recognition of thanks for all the people who've gone that extra mile in what we've had to do and what we've had to deliver during this crisis that we've all had to face up to. And finally, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank you. Once again, every time we have a council meeting, I like to say you are Wigan's longest serving mayor. Mr. Mayor, you've conducted the meetings, everyone that I've been to by virtual means, you've conducted them in a right, proper, equal manner. And I'd like to thank you and wish you and your family all the best for Christmas and the New Year. So that's all from me, Mr. Mayor. There'll be other announcements to follow as we go into 2021, and I will continue to keep members updated with the members brief that I send out on a regular basis. So just finishing off, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to wish all the members of the council all the best for the season and hope they have a very good Christmas, and let's always look forward to a very good 2021. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Councillor. I appreciate it. In moving the following reports, I will assume that all seconders will reserve the right to speak at the end of the other speakers. Constitutional issues. The annual scrutiny report 2019-20. We have a report on pages 19 to 42 of the agenda, which asks the council to formally accept the annual scrutiny report for 2019-20. I invite Councillor Raymond to move the annual scrutiny report for 2019-20. Councillor Raymond.
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
Is the recommendation seconded?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor, and yes.
You're on mute. You've been muted.
Yeah. Yes, I do wish to second it, Mr. Mayor, and I do reserve the right to speak. Thank you very much.
Do any other members wish to contribute? I have Councillor Michael Winstanley. Councillor Winstanley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yes, sorry, I pushed the speak a little bit too previously earlier on, so I do apologise for being a bit trigger happy. Could I just thank the writers and authors of this report, the annual scrutiny report. I think it's really, the work that we do as councillors is on scrutiny is extremely important, because it is about holding people to account and making sure that we're actually doing our best for our residents. So I would like to welcome this particular report. I have got some comments, some criticisms, but I would like to pick up on the work that's been done in the task and finish groups. I think that has been particularly useful and helpful this year. I did mention when this report came back 12 months ago that we should have more task and finish groups. Unfortunately, I then ended up having to lead one of those and chair one of them. So that should be a note to myself. Don't ever suggest anything, because you end up doing it. But I would like to thank all those members that took part in that. And I think that actually demonstrated that when we work together with a collective view and to put, to put some recommendations forward, that we actually do some really good work. And I would certainly hope that we can build on that, notwithstanding everything that's been said about, how difficult the beginning of next year is going to be. But I think more work that we can do like that, I think, should be welcomed. And we've also had an update today on that task and finish group from Rick, and there's some exciting things coming forward for that. So I'm sure I want to whet members' appetite for that, and I think they will welcome what is in the pipeline, and I'm looking forward to working with all members on improving that system. I would like to point out, though, that it's not quite working right across every bit of scrutiny, and I think this has become particularly pointed on children and young people's scrutiny, where we have seen that Ofsted visit in February highlighted some major issues in that, and not at the last scrutiny for children and young peoples, but the previous one. I think there was a lot of incredulity from members about assurances they'd been given, things had come to scrutiny, and yet things weren't as they'd been painted. So although, yes, we've got it right in some regards, we do need to improve on that. My final point would be that we need to make sure that we do have opposition members chairing and vice chairing some of these scrutiny committees. I know many councils across GM do that. And I do think that it, as best practice, it does look better for this authority if we do have at least one of those committees chaired by a member of the opposition. So that would be my final plea. I will leave that with the leader. That's my plea, and we will see what comes forward in the new municipal year. But I'd just like to welcome the report, notwithstanding my comments that I've made. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, I don't have anyone else to speak, so leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and can I thank Councillor Winsley for his comments? And yes, I was nodding, and we'll take things on board. Thank you, Michael.
Councillor Raymond, do you wish to sum up?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can I now put the report to the vote? All those against the approval of the report, please show in the chat facility. Anyone? I have no one against that, so the result of the vote is it's accepted. The appointment of independent persons for standard issues. In accordance with the report set out on pages 43 to 48 of the council agenda, the council is requested to appoint Dennis Holland, Greg Byron and John Sherples as independent persons for Wigan Council pursuant to section 28 of the Localism Act 2011 in relation to standards complaints against members. The term of office for each person will be 4 years. The applicants and term of office moved. I invite Councillor Raymond to move the recommendations.
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
The applicants and term of office seconded.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Do any other members wish to contribute? Councillor Winstanley, have you again? Are you speaking on this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies. Yes, thank you for noting these appointments. The one thing I would say is that in future, when we are doing these interviews, would it be possible that we could have some opposition involvement? I've got no questions about the process that's been followed or the suitability of the candidates in any way, shape or form. But I do think it's important that when we are appointing independent people, whether that be for audit and governance committee or whether these independent persons, that we should have some opposition involvement on those interview panels. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And if the cabinet members would note that for future reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Minister. I have Councillor Jones. You wish to speak on this item?
Hello, Mr. Mayor. First of all, just to echo what the leader said, I think you've done a fantastic job as the Mayor. Really do think you've been really impartial. And let's be honest, we've all been at the end of your raft, no matter what political party we are. Just as well to echo what the opposition leader says, I think it's really important going forward that Michael or whoever it is at the time would be involved in that. I don't think every councillor should be there, but definitely we need a leader in opposition. We usually do if we appoint a chief executive, so just hopefully the leader will take them comments on board. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Brearley, you wish to speak on this item?
Yeah, am I on, Councillor?
Yeah, you're on. I can see and hear you.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for speaking on this. That Jed Byron, I've just been reading his portfolio there, and he's is he a member of the Local Government Ombudsman Service and Solicitors Regulation Authority? To me, he'd be a valuable asset to this, and obviously get some fair, comments and views, and regarding his status in this independent person. What is confusing though with this is the rules and regulation what go with this standards committee, because it seems in the past that the offer of speaking to the independent persons has been rejected by the senior solicitor who deals with these. I've asked on numerous occasions to speak to the independent person, and it's been totally objected by the legal person to for me to have a conversation.
Sorry, guys, can I just bring the legal? Can I just bring Janet Davis in at this point?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify that Councillor Briley is correct when he referred to Greg Byron's occupations, but they were previous occupations. He no longer works in those capacities. I think the other comments Councillor Briley are making are personal matters relating to other issues that aren't connected to the report that's before the council tonight.
Okay, carry on, Councillor.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, can I relate through you my concerns and see if I can get some answers, please?
On what exactly, Councillor? What?
You know, the new rules and regulations of standards. Are we allowed to speak to the independent people who are going to be newly elected?
Well, I think you'll have to bring that up at another time, Councillor.
That's for me. I just want to liaison with you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, you'll have to email the solicitors, Councillor, the council solicitors. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I don't have anyone else who wishes to speak on this, so Councillor Rigby, you reserve your right to speak.
I'm quite happy to let the recommendation stand as it on its own. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Raymond, do you wish to sum up?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I want to welcome Councillor Winstanley and Councillor Jones' comments, and I can assure you that your recommendations will be taken on board. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can I now put the report to the vote? Can all those against the approval of the report please show in the chat facility? I have 2 against, which is Councillor Jones and Councillor Maiden. So that report has been accepted. Thank you. Local authority governors. The council is requested to approve the nominations for the appointment and reappointment of school governors as set out on pages 49 and 54 of the council agenda. Are the nominations moved? I invite Councillor Bullen to move the recommendations.
Beg to move the recommendations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are the recommendations seconded?
Beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do any members wish to contribute? I have no one who wishes to contribute, so I'd like to go straight to the report, straight to the vote on the report. Can all those against the approval of the report please show in the chat facility? I have no votes against, so the result of the vote is accepted. The electoral review of Wigan Council submission on council size. We have a report on pages 55 to 108 of the agenda, which outlines the draft submission to the Boundary Commission on the council size for Wigan Council. I invite the leader to move the report. Leader.
Happy to move the report, Mr. Mayor.
Is the recommendation seconded?
Beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Do any members wish to contribute on this? I have no one who wishes to contribute, so can I go straight to the vote, or would you like to sum up, Leader?
No, I don't think there's really much need to sum up, Mr. Mayor, because this is the start of the process. I think many members understand, and I know along with other members of the opposition leaders, we did meet with the Boundary Commission at the start of this process, and we just really need to get this going now. and so we can go through the rest of the review before 2023. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I put the report to the vote? All those against the approval of the report, please show in the chat facility. I have no one against, so that has been accepted. The appointment of local returning officer for the combined authority mayoral elections. At pages 109 to 112 of the council agenda, we have a report which formally requires that each council shall appoint an officer to be the local returning officer for the election of the combined authority mayor. I invite the leader to move the recommendation. Leader?
Happy to move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Is the recommendation seconded?
Beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Do any members wish to contribute on this? Councillor Jones, would you like to speak on this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think through these hard times that we're having recently and a lot of people losing their jobs, I do think, and this is no disrespect to our chief executive who I have a lot of time for, but I do think that they should not be paying any extra money. I think the salaries that chief executives across the board are on is far more than your average person. And I think it's roughly about £15,000 extra, I think, at the moment would be a little bit of an insult to the people. So just that, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor. I have no one else to speak. So, Deputy Leader, would you like to?
I'm sure the leader will be able to answer any of questions or make things clearer. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader, can you sum up, please?
Happy to sum up, Mr. Mayor. I think we've made the right choice in our chief executive, and I think we've made our right choice with the returning officer. I note Councillor Jones's comments, but I'm happy to move the report as it's down in front of you tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. I will now put the report to the vote. Can all those against the approval of the report please show in the chat facility? I have 2 against, 3 against. I'll leave it another moment. I have 3 votes against: Councillor Jones, Councillor Maiden, Councillor Bareilly. So that report has been accepted. Policy and budget framework items. Treasury Management half-yearly review. At pages 113 to 130, we have a report which was considered by the Cabinet on the 19th of November 2020. I invite Councillor Raymond to move the recommendations. Councillor Raymond.
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
Are the recommendations seconded?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Do any other members wish to contribute? I have Councillor Jones. Do you wish to speak on this?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do promise I'm finished after this. So reading the report, it claims the council operates a balanced budget, which in theory is true. The problem with a balanced budget is all it means is the money coming in, thereabouts matches money coming out. And what that means in Wigan is we waste a lot of money. We waste a hell of a lot of money. We have a lot of money come in, we waste a lot, the books are balanced. I'll give you an example. This week alone, I had to OK a Brighton Borough application to pay £400 for a bin at the side of the road because our highways department don't have a big enough budget. So what the budget tells me is there isn't enough money there for councillors to look after our wards. So let's see why the books are balanced. Where are we wasting money that could go better spent in our ward looking after it? So I'll give you an example. £25 million we borrow out interest free to other areas. We spend over £200,000 putting money in so people can run around like traffic cones. Honestly, you couldn't make it up. Mr. Mayor, I could go on and on at why we waste money. Let's look at the galleries, for instance. We spend millions of pounds buying the galleries, and I've been up there, and I said this as over the last 2 years becoming a father twice. Them paintings look like paedophilia, satanic worshipping, with pictures of dead babies and kids with the private parts out, and we keep going on about it. Now, do you think the residents of Wigan would rather, and by the way, they're always empty when you go up there, would rather see their money spent, parks, football pitches, having the grass cut, bins at the side of the road? That is how this council will get the respect of the people, by looking after the wards, keeping it clean, making it look good. Not, oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor, your picture went bigger. I thought you was going to interrupt me. I really think that in future, what we should do is allocate a certain amount of money for each ward, for the ward councillors to allocate, like with Brighton Borough money, to make the area look good. Then if you've got money over, then I'm fine for you. You can waste it on running around traffic cones or whatever it is we're going to do next. And I said that tongue in cheek. I've nothing against them people running around. I think the funding's scandalous. But, you know, running an organisation, if you can get the funding, you will do. So I'll leave it on that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for letting me finish, because I was quite critical then. And you have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now have Councillor Brearley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me speak on this. Yes, just to enhance the Appendix 1, Wigan Council's investments as at 30th of September 2020. You know, it's £130 million investments, which seems a bit high, considering that we've got potholes everywhere, we've got everything everywhere, we've no investments. Ingley Green has got nothing. We've no health centre, we've just lost a doctor's surgery. You know, we don't have investments at all in Ingley Green. It seems like all the money what comes in, the council tax, of the £5 million generated for Ingley Green, always seems to go out and get spent elsewhere. Every officer I contact over trying to get investments made to the area is with no money, Now, I went to a meeting a few months ago in a church what needed some renovation. Spoke to a senior officer director, needed £1,900 spent on it. Without checking anything, yes, I'll pay for that. But yet, when it comes down to my ward, when we want some improvements of Christmas decorations, no money. Even following the procedure of putting it on the budget last year, the officer never complied with my request. Now, that was following the correct procedures. Now, I've asked the officer, I want to see your budget, what you've got. I don't have a budget. Well, who spends the money? And what's this here now? Aberdeen's liquidation fund. Aberdeen? That's a to the side of the country. Why are we setting aside £20 million for a liquidation company when we could do with that money in each ward? Giving £500,000 to each ward is £20 million. Invest it in the wards and let the councillors who speak to the people, let them decide what is needed in the area. Like myself, I live in Ingley Green, and I'll be honest with you, Mr. Mayor, I want to withhold my council tax because I don't see any value for money with this Labour town doing what they keep doing all the time and squandering the money. Where's that £5,000 per house? Where's our 106 money? £700,000 of Ingley Green's 106 money. We don't know. Then an extra £5,000 per house. Come on, guys. We want answers and we want investments in Ingley Green. Okay, Mr. Mayor, thanks very much for letting me speak.
Right, thank you. Councillor Maiden, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm sticking as well here. And a big thank you to Nick for putting the meeting together and all his democratic service team. Yeah, I'd like to get onto the Fire Within project while it's been brought up by Steve Jones. You talk about balancing the books. Now, this Fire Within, it's had £272,000 off this council. it's been given half the gallery's building at free rent. How can I turn round to market traders and say, these cronies here, which they are, the same people getting the same handouts all the time. Lord Smith's daughters.
Councillor, be careful of the language you're using. All right, continue.
I'll give you a legal description of what a crony is, and it matches every one of these. So, you want me to go on?
I'm just asking you to watch.
I want to know
the
what the
language
conflict
using. That's all.
I want to know where the conflict of interest is too with this money, because Lord Smith's daughter is part of these projects down there, and it's wrong. It's the same people getting the handouts all the time. The galleries, them people in there who have shops are having to pay top rent, and then all of a sudden this art and fair gets shoved in there, free rent and money handed towards it. There's quantifiable numbers. There's 20,000 people coming here. When we asked, how do you measure that? Oh, because we see them. How could you see 20,000 people? It's a nonsense. It's a quango and it needs stopping, especially when these cones are dancing down King Street. On a street what's been shut down because of social distancing and all the rest of it. And these cronies, which I'll explain what a crony is, are allowed to go down there, dance and take taxpayer money. It's ridiculous, Mr. Mayor. And you could see through it surely as a socialist. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I don't have anyone else who wishes to speak on this. So, Leader, you reserve the right. Would you like to... Oh, hang on. I have Councillor Halliwell. Councillor Halliwell, do you wish to speak on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I couldn't help but notice and hear some of the comments about squandering money, and waste, and lack of investment. But I would point out, Mr. Mayor, every year our accounts are audited externally. There is internal audits go on throughout the year about how we spend our money, where the money goes. And every year we get an unqualified account from the auditors, which basically means we handle our finances very well. They don't see evidence
Point of explanation, Mr. Mayor. Point of explanation.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Point of explanation.
Mr. Mayor, I wish to finish, please.
Sorry.
I wish to finish.
Hang on, Councillor Halliwell. Who's trying to speak?
Jones. Point of explanation, Councillor Jones.
Yeah. It has to concern something that you said earlier, yeah, Councillor, which may be misinterpreted.
It does. So it was, Councillor, I'll be quick. Councillor Halliwell said comments made about wasting money. Only I said that. Let me explain. When you're on about being audited, nobody has ever said criminal. That's what an audit would look at. We're saying you shouldn't spend money on we're saying you should spend money on different stuff than you do. So please stop with the audit. Nobody said it's criminal. We said you're wasting money. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to explain that.
That was the point of explanation. Councillor Halliwell, will you continue, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I was saying, every year we get audited externally, we get audited internally. There's no evidence of waste. There's no reports of squandering money. We do run a balanced budget, and every year we found that we do that. So, Mr. Mayor, if there was evidence of waste, if there was evidence of squandering money, it would be evident, and it isn't. And it's externally audited. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Brealey, what is your point of order?
Councillor Halliwell there is mentioning everything's ordered and there's no paper trail. Well, there is paper trail.
Sorry, Councillor. What rules do you feel have been broken? That's what a point of order is.
Well, he's misleading the people with his comments saying everything's above and above board, and there's no trail of what money has been spent elsewhere. Well, there is. It's called General Governance Matters, and this audit department in Wigan Council.
Councillor, I'm sorry. Councillor, I'm sorry. That is not a point of order.
Of course it is.
All right.
You're quoting me, but you never quoted Steve Jones.
Okay.
Come on, Mr. Mayor. You know, a
Councillor,
explanation on what he's saying there.
Councillor Jones gave a point of explanation, which he explained how he was being misinterpreted. You're saying that the rules of the council have been broken. You're not producing a point of order. So that's the end of that.
Then. Point of explanation then, Councillor.
What did you say earlier, which is being misunderstood, Councillor?
Due to having dyslexia, I keep getting...
Councillor, I'm sorry. A point of you keep breaking up, so I can't see you, but I'll explain it. A point of explanation.
They don't do anything. They don't do anything. Well,
can you mute Councillor Brealey, please? Councillor Brealey, a point of explanation is where you have said something and the councillor is misinterpreting what you have said. You have not raised a point of order. You have not raised a point of explanation. So we're moving on. Councillor Halliwell, do you have a point of order? Because I have it on the chat facility.
Yeah. Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. I've just been accused of misleading the public. That's an outrageous comment. If I'm accused about misleading the public, then our external auditors are as well, aren't they? And our internal auditors.
Well, I did rule that, Councillor. So I did rule a point of order.
That was not a point of order, and I completely refute that comment made by that gentleman.
Well, I didn't accept his point of order, Councillor. Now, I've got Councillor Raymond, but I've no one else to speak, so it should be the leader next, because he has reserved the right to speak on this item. So, leader, would you like to speak now? And then Councillor Raymond will come in to sum up at the end.
I think, Mr. Mayor, there's been a number of explanations over a number of years that people don't always understand or want to understand. And I think tonight possibly we saw some of that. All I can say is that this council balances its books every year. This council does everything right, above board, despite some of the allegations that we see by people. This council is spot on in how it handles its accounts and matters. And I'm now happy for Councillor Raymond to sum up. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can we have a point of explanation then, Mr. Councillor Leader? Point of explanation.
Councillor Brealey, would you like to make a point of explanation, please?
Yeah, point of explanation. The leader just said the book's balanced, but yet.
So I'm sorry, Councillor. What did you say earlier that you feel has been misinterpreted?
Well, he says the book's balanced.
So I'm sorry, Councillor. That's no point of explanation. Councillor Raymond,
I think I need some training, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor. I think perhaps you do.
Confused with all this. So can I request some training?
Certainly
because I keep
you can.
asking for it.
Councillor Raymond, do you now wish to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just start by refuting all the claims made by Councillor Jones and Councillor Brealey?
Hang on, Councillor. Councillor Maiden, would you like to make a point of explanation?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that. Yeah, I'd like to a point of exclamation towards Councillor Molyneux. He was going on about illegal and irregularities. We're not disputing that. Just because something's unethical doesn't mean it's illegal. So can I point him out on that? We feel the spending on cones is unethical, not illegal. Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you, Councillor. I'm now going to ask Councillor Raymond to sum up, and there'll be no more interruptions on this point.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I was saying before, I want to refute all the claims of wastage of money and all the allegations that have been put in by opposition. We are one of the exemplary local authorities, if not the exemplary local authority. I am not going into the legalities or the moralities of the things. This is about treasury management. And we have been praised by Local Government Association, that is a government controlled association, that is an independent organization. We have been praised by their peer reviews. We have been praised by King's Fund, our external auditors. External auditors have nothing to do with the council. They are independent. Councils across the country and from abroad come to visit us to see how we financially manage this organisation. And surprisingly, Daily Telegraph, a paper that is not our friend, has recently mentioned us with regards to spending review, that how wonderfully we manage our finances. So I'm not going to take this point that we are not spending the money appropriately and we are wasting the money. Regarding the galleries, this is part of our culture. The fire within is part of our culture. You are entitled to your views, but so far 20,000 people have visited the galleries. And I'm proud to say that 3,000 young people are involved directly in the programs and the cultural offer that is on display there. Another point that was raised by Councillor Jones and Councillor Bradley was that we are investing money. I just want to clarify that that money is not part of the budget. That is called emergency cash, and we can invest it with in short term with any organisation that we feel safe with. And I want to refute another claim by Councillor Jones, and that is we lend people money with no interest. That is wrong. We always charge interest whenever we lend the money, and most of the time it is above the normal interest that is in the market. So I hope that helps, and I hope that explains, I hope that answers all your allegations. Thank you.
Right, I will now put the report to the vote. All those against the approval of the report, please show in the chat facility. I have 4 votes against: Councillor Maiden, Councillor Brealey, 5, Councillor Gerard, Councillor Jones, and Councillor Hodgkinson. So that report has been accepted. Thank you very much. The Housing Revenue Account Rent Setting Report 2021-22. Can I remind members of our council house tenants that they will have a personal and prejudicial interest, but they can stay in the meeting and vote. On pages 131 to 140 of the agenda, we have a report which was considered by Cabinet on the 19th of November. The council is requested to agree the recommendations as set out on page 132 of the agenda. Are the recommendations moved? I invite Councillor Raymond to move the recommendations.
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor. Happy to move.
Are the recommendations seconded?
Beg to second, Mr. Mayor, and reserve the right to speak at the end and to declare a personal and prejudicial interest in respect of this item. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do any other members wish to contribute? I have Councillor Watson. Would you like to speak on this issue, Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to speak about the families currently living within social housing. Now, within the borough, 31% of the families, that's 6,807, are in receipt of universal credit. Now, the council acknowledges that 3/4 of these families, that's over 5,100, are currently in rent arrears. To break it down per ward, that's just over 200 families per ward that are struggling on universal credit to pay their rent currently. Now, due to the pandemic within the borough alone, last year we had 7,398 claimants in receipt of universal credit, and that has doubled or increased by 99% to 14,857. And then there is the 28% of families living in social housing who are not in receipt of benefits. That's 6,151 families who may have been furloughed who may have been made redundant. And then there's the public sector families who aren't getting a pay rise this year due to the pay freeze. Bearing in mind that 1.5% doesn't seem a lot to you and me, this could make or break some families and send them to the food bank. Then when you consider the council tax increases, which are pretty much inevitable, the rise in the cost of living, utility bills and food, and all of a sudden, this council, whose motto is be kind, isn't very kind to those on low-income families and the most vulnerable within our wards and communities. So therefore, I'm gonna vote against these recommendations with this 1.5% increase in social housing, and I urge each and every member to think about them 200 families in their wards who will be struggling with this 1.5% pay rise. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Brearley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope I'm not being interrupted again. Yeah, I've got first-hand experience on this now. There's a council house in my ward. I got complaints from residents about the condition of this house. That the only thing what they didn't replace in the house was the banister rail. Every item in that house, including the floor, was replaced. Every even the windows, the doors, everything was replaced. The back garden was completely wrecked. I've got photographs of it. Now, this one contractor came in, and there's a drain pipe outside, not even going into a drain. Now, this is the problem with your raising your rents. We need to look properly on these contractors and what work they're carrying out, and possibly these people who wreck these council houses. Now, I believe from information that the person who wrecked that house and smashed every window, every door, every skirting board, all the plastic needed replacing, the new central heating, a new kitchen, a complete new bathroom, a new fire inside, a complete rewire, was then given a brand new council house. Now, we were led to understand that people living in brand new council houses was not allowed to be on benefits. It was the houses were going to be given to people who were working, who would look after them. And I was appalled to hear that this tenant had left this property in such a disgraceful condition and then was given a council house, a brand new one. In cost of this house, that was 3 months ago. Now, this director, Mr. Burton, needs to cooperate with elected members for us to resolve this situation, because we are getting inundated with complaints from residents of works not being completed, people being living in houses, a 4-bedroom house where a couple lives in, no children. We need to be involved in this fully, because we are getting inundated with other residents' complaints with they've got children and everything. So can we have an assurance from this council and this report that councillors will be more involved if they want to be? It's up to the councillors who of that ward if they want to be. I personally want to get involved because I feel my business experience is vital within. That was a nasty look you gave me then, councillor. No? I mean, are you
I'm not even looking at you, councillor. I'm looking at my notes.
Oh, it's the impression you were giving. I mean, I've run my own business for 30 years, mate. I mean, and everything I've mentioned in repairing that house, my business services, things like that. So I think I'll be a valuable asset to this council with the savings of costings and everything. My expertise. I mean, and that's what I pride myself in. I mean, I look for value for money, not wasting money. So can we have an assurance off you, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, you can't get an insurance off me, councillor. All what we're talking about is the rent rising.
Yeah, well,
I can't give any insurance on that. It's up to council whether they accept it or not.
well, I'm going to reject it because they shouldn't be putting the rents up. They should be looking at these contractors charging extortion prices. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Maiden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I just want to reiterate what Councillor Watson said. He's covered everything I was going to say there, really. We're really popping the most vulnerable in society with the rent rise, especially after I've just heard a speech by Councillor Wakefield talking about equality, the vulnerable, and pushing for kids' school meals. But yet, round the back of this and the moral signalling, should be voting for a rent rise on the most vulnerable. So will a lot of socialists in here. The party masquerading as Labour, I call it. It's supposed to be a social council, this. Why are we hitting the vulnerable, the needy and the poor again in this ward? I mean, the council houses in this ward are not that great anyway, are they? I mean, look at the state of them. I just think it's a bad move and it's bad timing. And nobody who considers themselves a socialist in this town hall should be voting for this rise. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Now move on to Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, let's look at what people get in a council house for the rent they pay. They move in, no carpet, no oven, doors that don't fit proper. We even have a policy that we won't put them a back fence up. Even if the next door has a dangerous dog and they have children, we still won't do it. We're on about being kind. We're doing this, as Councillor Mayden said, the same socialist act of be kind and look after the most vulnerable, school meals, and then we raise the rent. Now, 1.5% might not be that much difference, but I guess it's looking at it as if the signal that it's giving out. Again, we're praising all these people who are working so hard. The leader said about these people on low-income jobs who are fighting on the front line against coronavirus. Let me tell him, a lot of them people, he's just put 1.5% on the rent. A lot of them people live in council houses. Like you said, they're low paid. Now, I do understand that you have a problem. I'm not going to go on about my own business or anything. Councillor Bradley's covered that. But I have worked in the trade for 16 years. And there's a bit of a joke. If you do a job for the council, you put a high price in. They'll accept it. It's like monopoly money. The companies we're using, and I'll not name any, Mr. Mayor, had an advert for a plasterer, and that's what I've always done, plastering. And they was asking for plasterers for £10 an hour. 1 year's experience preferred. What type of tradesman are we actually paying to go into our residents' houses and do plastering? That was just plastering. So we're paying an absolute fortune because we don't have any people employed here who've actually, not like me and Councillor Bradley, who might have done, I'm not like people who've run big businesses. We need people like that who will go out and negotiate prices on behalf of the council and get the best people in at the best prices. You know, you're negotiating, you don't say yes to the first offer you've had. And we don't want them then employing cowboys to do work. The work that these people get is ridiculous. You can't then put a rent increase. Now, if you're going to go to these best companies, you're going to give them more care, we're going to put fences on in a back garden, then by all means, possibly look at raising it a little bit. But the standard we are giving them is going down, the rent's going up. I'll give you one final example. A private landlord, Mr. Mayor, has to put an oven in a house. Wigan Council don't. These tenants have got to go to Compassion in Action to get an oven because we don't even put them an oven in. And now we're telling them we're going to charge them more rent. So I think that's one thing we really need to look at is let them have an oven in there. This is the same council that will get onto a private landlord if we pay housing benefits and tell him he's not looking after the tenant, and then we do exactly the same. The conditions that a lot of our residents live in just ain't good. Now, if we do look after them better, I think it's on a compatible rent. I think it's a very good price. It's about £320 for a 3-bedroom house. That's great money, as long as we do the correct jobs. We put proper tradesmen in. We don't move them in too soon, and we put back fences up and ovens in and let them have some, and then what you might find, Mr. Mayor, is that a lot of people actually have more pride in the home they live. They'll look at it and think, I want to bring my children up here. They'll not just see it as a pass-by place till they can get something better. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Now move on to Councillor Gerard. Are you there, Councillor?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just want to reiterate what a few councillors said tonight. I'm totally against putting this rent increase up. I can't see any rhyme nor reason to put it up when we are actually wasting money on contractors. I've had first-hand knowledge only recently on simple jobs where we're actually wasting money on these contractors who are actually taking the mick out of us. Completely taking the mick. That's from roofers to electricians to plasterers. We need to sort out this wastage before anything. Before we put that stress of extra money, people are trying to find extra money each week on a house what's not being repaired or maintained properly by this council. And also, if we are going to raise rent, which more than likely it is going to go through because it's a Labour council, you'll have to put money up. But Salford Council have only just announced that they're going to do a large council housing scheme for 50 years. This is something that we need to be looking at. We need to be investing in our own housing stock and getting people out of high private rents and into affordable, good quality homes. And if we can't maintain our own stock at the moment, we should not be putting that rent up. We need to look at where we're wasting money. And we are wasting money. On a previous presentation, I didn't get a chance to speak, but £130 million in Wigan Town Centre, and yet we're putting rent up on people's houses. No, I cannot go for this one bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I now have Councillor Kathleen Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are you there, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with all what the councillors have said. The books might be balanced, but they might have been balanced with wasted money. The corns might have caused a bit of a laugh.
Sorry, Councillor, we've moved on from that. We're on
I am bringing this in because money is being wasted and money should be spent in the houses, and exactly what the council have said. It's so hard work to get improvements done, and I thoroughly agree, and I'm totally against any rent raise. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wish to speak? Then I will ask Councillor Halliwell, as you reserved your right to speak. Would you like to speak now, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I first of all start with just pointing a couple of quick things. The housing revenue account is a ring-fenced account. So whatever money is raised by the rents is put back into them properties. But Mr. Mayor, in 2012, this council was effectively forced into buying itself out from the previous housing subsidy system. The advantage of this at the time meant we could reinvest in our own stock from the income we generated from the rents. To do this, we had to borrow the money based on a 30-year business plan based upon a small increase in the council rent each year. In July 2015, the then Chancellor of the Exchequer announced that social rents would have to be reduced by 1% each year for 4 years. This meant that the annual rental income is now lower than the figure which was used to calculate the buyer of the loan that was taken out in 2012. The decision effectively cut the government expenditure to hard-hit councils like ours, resulting in a cumulative loss in the dwelling rents of approximately £29.8 million. Despite this, we have still managed to build, and people talk about lack of investment. Despite this, we have still managed to build approximately 350 dwellings across this borough. For general needs, older persons sheltered accommodation, autism schemes, independent living, dementia-friendly properties in Hindley, Lee, Orrell, Winston, Whistler Mains and Goose Green and Goulburn. So the increase in housing rent of £1.16 per week will be invested in building a further 250 properties for rent. This will include general housing needs, bungalows, older persons extra care and older persons apartments, much needed in this borough. These will go in places like Bryn, Goose Green, Lee, Wigan and Standish, with more planned and with nearly 9,000 people on the housing waiting list, I would hope you'll appreciate this rationale, as did the members and tenant reps of the housing panel when this was being discussed. The investment in our housing stock needs to continue, and this year we've seen the completion of a multi-year programme of new bathrooms and wet rooms to over 18,500 existing homes. The bathroom replacement programme only created approximately 37 local apprentices on its own, and including one young person who went on to win the Greater Manchester Apprentice of the Year. Investment in fire safety has continued in the last 12 months. Examples include improvements to fire stopping in high-rise blocks, and with a major programme of work starting next year that includes fire stopping improvements and the replacement of passenger lifts, for example, in high-rise flats. It is also worth remembering that on average about 7,500 existing council properties in the borough benefit from cyclical maintenance and improvement every year, and this is an ongoing commitment each year. The capital programme sets out our commitments for anybody to read. Colleagues, 1/3 of our tenants receive housing benefit, 1/3 partial housing benefit, and approximately 1/3 pay full rent at a favourable rate when compared to other rental sectors. We recognise the dichotomies of the current situation, and should someone become unemployed or furloughed, we have a comprehensive and considerable welfare offer, where we can offer help and advice to people that may be struggling to pay their rent or council tax, or indeed many other problems they may have, all supported by our third sector partners that include Unified Credit Union, the BRIC, Compassion in Action and CAB. This is of course undertaken on an individual basis because each circumstance is different and time relative. Not everybody will get furloughed at the same time. Indeed, this year, low-income families in the borough will be supported by a £15 per week per child for food in the Christmas and February holidays, a £10 extra Christmas food grant, a £20 gas and electric, and a £10 for water, with additional support to other vulnerable households during the winter months, including payments for direct and vouchers. The increase in council rent of £1.16 will allow the council to increase its stock, maintain the decency home standard, take advantage of energy efficient retrofitting to reduce fuel costs, and meet our obligations to the planned maintenance programme and employ local apprentices in our communities. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Raymond, do you wish to sum up?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to sum up. I do understand our opposition's concerns about families going into hardship, families being furloughed, families going on benefits, and that is why we are carrying £7 million of debt in our budget, and that is and in our budget deficit, that is £40 million. And we suspended the rent collection and council tax collection as soon as the pandemic started, and we tried to provide relief to our tenants as much as possible. While I do acknowledge these concerns, I do not think that not raising the rent is the right option, because we are only raising it by £1.16 for houses and 2p for garages, and I do not think that not increasing this amount will provide any appropriate relief for our families who are facing hardships. They need a comprehensive welfare package, and I think we should fight for that rather than providing them piecemeal reliefs. So I am happy that our opposition has raised concerns about the state of the houses and state of the disrepair that most of our houses are, or many of our houses are. And I think this is exactly why we need to increase the council, why we need to increase the rent, because for the last 4 years we were not able to increase the rents because the government, because we couldn't legally. So I think this will generate us £12 million of investment that we'll use to replenish our housing stock, that we'll use to repair.
Point of order, Councillor Jones, what's your point of order?
I can guarantee one of the two last councillors is misleading us, Mr. Mayor, and lying to us, and that's a breach. I'm not going to accuse which one of them in it. Oh, I'm not lying, I'll take that back.
Councillor, you're going to have to explain what rules have been broken.
I will. Well, one councillor said that it's only £1 sum and it's not a lot of money, and the other said that we're going to get apprenticeships, we're going to repair houses. So I want to know which one of you is misleading us that it's not a lot of money, or you're going to be able to employ all these apprenticeships and fix these houses up, and it's great. And I love that you nearly said the government then and realised what you said, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Jones, I do take your point, and I'm coming to that, so please bear with me. So this will generate us £12 million of investment that we are going to use to replenish our housing stock and to build more houses. When we come to build more houses, then we'll generate the economy, then we'll create the apprenticeship, and then we'll be able to deliver the housing that we need, because we've got 9,500 people on our waiting list, and many of them are on the brink of being homeless. So we will generate the economy. It is not a lot of raise that we are doing. So I hope that clarifies your point.
Point of explanation, Councillor.
Councillor, what did you say earlier? What's being misinterpreted?
The people who are homeless, 9,500.
Councillor, I'm sorry, that's no point of explanation.
Point of order then. Point of order. What is point of explanation?
Councillor, what rule do you feel has been broken?
Point of explanation. There's not 9,000.
Councillor, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to accept your point of order, and I am not prepared to accept your point of explanation. Councillor Raymond, can you continue, please?
Councillor Bradley, if you didn't hear properly, 9,500 people are on our housing waiting lists, and many of them are on the brink of being homeless. I think that clarifies your concerns. And I'm happy that Councillor Gerard has actually raised Salford's ambitious plans to build more housing. And I'm assuring you that in very near future, we are working on those plans and we'll be able to deliver not that ambitious plan, but definitely a reasonable, a substantial amount of council housing in this local authority. Thank you.
Right, I will now put the report to the vote. Will all those against the approval of the report please show in the chat facility? Right, I have against, let me just get this right, Councillor Maiden, Councillor Kathleen Hulton, Councillor Watson, Councillor Jones, Councillor Gerard, Councillor Hodgkinson, Councillor Brealey, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Collinson, Councillor Brealey again, and Councillor Whittingham. So the result of the vote is that report is accepted. Questions. Councillor Winstanley has withdrawn the question that he submitted on the Cabinet meeting of 5th of November 2020, which relates to the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework Strategy. I will now move on to notices of motion. A motion has been submitted by Councillor Whittingham, which is set out on page 147 of the agenda. Councillor Whittingham.
Happy to propose a motion, Mr. Mayor.
And is the motion seconded?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Michael Winstanley, I would like to formally second the motion and reserve my right to speak later.
Right, thank you. Do any members wish to speak on the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak on it.
Well, hang on, let's see if anybody else wishes to speak first. Because when you start, nobody else can. Okay, Councillor Whittingham. Right, I've got Councillor Harding who wishes to speak on this.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, first, does Councillor Whittingham not get to propose his motion formally and then sum up at the end? Sorry.
Yes, Councillor, do you want to introduce, it does, yes. Councillor, do you want to introduce your motion? I'm assuming everyone's read it.
Well, I would assume they have.
Yeah, well, go on, introduce it. You've got 10 minutes. And plus the right to reply at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to propose this motion.
Fireworks are used by people throughout the year to mark different events. While they can bring much enjoyment to some people, they can cause significant problems and fear for other people and animals. They can be a source of fear and distress for many animals, including pet animals, farm livestock and wildlife. Animals affected not only suffer psychological distress, but can also cause themselves injuries, sometimes very serious ones, as they attempt to run away and hide from the noise. For these reasons, I hope this council will vote to accept my motion as set out in the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Councillor Winston has reserved his right, so I'll now move on to Councillor Herding. Do you wish to speak on this matter?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this. Currently, the loudest fireworks, which can be used by professional pyrotechnic organisations in the UK, are legally set at 120 decibels. However, most are produced at 110 decibels to ensure that manufacturing variations don't inadvertently exceed the 120 decibel level. Many of the larger fireworks deliver 90 decibels or less. Batches of fireworks are regularly tested independently to ensure compliance to CE and British standards regulations. Councillor Whittingham's motion mentions the distress caused to pets and animals, and indeed the motion is effectively a model motion produced and circulated by the RSPCA in an effort to reduce such distress. However, the motion also alludes to distress caused to vulnerable people, some with existing medical conditions. These include dementia, certain types of autism, and of course mental distress, which may, in some cases, be caused to our servicemen and women due to their experiences in conflict situations. Having served 33 years in the Fire and Rescue Service, including several years as an operational firefighter, I've witnessed injuries caused by fireworks, and indeed as a young firefighter, I was for a number of years tasked with visiting.
It's frozen. Councillor Erding, you appear to have been frozen. I can't hear you. So I'll move on to the next speaker and we'll come back to you if you wish to continue. So if I could move on to Councillor Brearley. Councillor Brearley, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, right. We've lost Councillor Erding, so I'll bring him in after. You're up to speak, Councillor.
Frozen right now, Mr. Mayor.
No, I can still see and hear you perfectly well, Councillor. It's Councillor Erding who we're struggling with.
Right. Yeah, this motion, yeah, can sympathise with it. It's a long tradition where organisations can do proper displays, and I agree with that. But there's some of these idiots, and they are idiots, who buying fireworks and use them as weapons sometimes. You know what I mean? Which how can we please start? You know what I mean? I agree with Whittingham and what he's saying. Like I said, it's an old tradition that people buy fireworks and set them off, and I mean, I think they should only just be sold possibly the day before and not like weeks before or weeks commencing now up to New Year, so people can set them off, which is causing a nuisance. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I can totally sympathise with this motion, as well as the animal aspect. I think we have to look at our servicemen, especially them who've been in Afghanistan and Iraq, places like that. Being ex-service myself, I come into contact with a few veterans who dread this time of year, the time of year when fireworks come along, and basically they're living under the pillows for a good fortnight before. So I think we should look at live, see if we can get proper licensing on these fireworks sales, only having well organised events. I've got a good track record of having proper events, and yeah, I'm totally in support of this. So that's just what I'd like to mention. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harding, are you back with us? I'm sorry, we seem to have lost you there, so I've had to move on.
I'm back again. Technology says that having been live online since 6 o'clock, it would drop out when I was doing a short 2 minutes. But yes, I'm online. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can continue, would that be okay?
Yes, if you could continue.
Thank you. As I was saying, having been in the Fire and Rescue Service for 33 years, I've witnessed injuries caused by fireworks, and as a young firefighter, I was tasked with delivering presentations to schools to give to pupils about the dangers of fireworks. And these presentations included many slides showing horrific injuries, which were shown to pupils to drive the point home. This motion does not seek to spoil or stop the public enjoying fireworks, but it does seek to ensure that they enjoy fireworks safely, whilst at the same time allowing other members of the community and their pets to also enjoy the bonfire period and other celebratory periods without fear or distress. I do therefore feel it would be remiss of me not to support this motion, and I therefore fully endorse and support Councillor Whittingham's motion, and I would urge my councillor colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. We now have Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Everything that I was going to mention has already been covered from a veteran's perspective. Obviously, I'm a 20-year veteran myself. We've got a huge veterans community within the borough, and many of them do dread this time of year and the build up to bonfire night. We've got a lot of veterans out there, young men like myself, who have suffered with PTSD. And on a personal note, I have 1 year actually sat underneath a kitchen table on New Year's Eve because I was terrified of the fireworks. So it is pertinent, it is relevant, and I wholeheartedly support this motion by Councillor Whittingham. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must admit, coming into this motion, I was a bit undecided between safety and being a libertarian. Even Councillor Watson there, but especially Councillor Harding, has made my decision, and I'm going to support this motion. I just want to say to Councillor Harding, well done. You know, you just showed there that councillors from different parties can work together, and you brought your expertise in. And then you actually convinced an independent councillor based on what you said. So thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. We now have Councillor Kathleen Houlton.
Oops.
I think we've lost the sound, Councillor.
Sorry. Right, I thoroughly back this proposal, and I'm totally behind Councillor Harding. I thought he put an excellent proposal forward, and he convinced me, and I'm sure he must have convinced many others. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you. I don't have any other speakers, so Councillor Winstanley, as you have reserved your right to speak as a seconder, I now invite you to speak on the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't intend to talk for very long. I'm sure members will be grateful about that. I'd like to thank those members that have indicated that they are going to support the motion. And I think it is important to just stress that we're not seeking to ban all fireworks. We're not authoritarian or dictatorial, but we want to put in proper measures that will help to take account of the issues that have been outlined in the debate tonight. So without further ado, I'll formally second that and hand back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you. Councillor Whittingham, I now invite you to sum up on the motion.
Yeah, just a short reply. I understood that I had to keep the motion speech pretty short, but anyway, I was intending to include the vulnerable people, mentally handicapped people, and veterans, and I'm sure there's an whole host of other people as well. But I'm very pleased with everything that's been said in favour of this, and I'm happy to proceed to the vote, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I now put the motion to the vote? Can all those against the approval of the motion please show in the chat facility? I have no votes against, so that motion has been accepted by the council. Yes. A motion has been submitted by Councillor Raymond, which is set out on page 147 of the agenda. Councillor Raymond, would you like to introduce your motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I hope everyone will join me when I say thank you to our heroic staff in care sector, those working in the nursing homes and community, those looking after their family members, young carers and social workers who all put their life at risk to protect ours. Your contribution has always been about life and death, but particularly in this pandemic, you proved to be the real heroes. You bring hope and life into the communities and our families. We all are hugely indebted to you, so a big thank you from this floor. Mr. Mayor, today's motion is not a motion to ask for more leftovers. For a crumbling body of social care, this is the motion to ask for the respect and fairness it deserves. Colleagues, this is not a secret anymore that this government is not a friend of the local government, and especially local authorities in the north of England. Mr. Mayor, after a decade of slashing public funding, once again, a council's ability to care for its most vulnerable residents will depend on its local house values. Once again, a council's tax base will determine the quality and extent of care it provides. And once again, the poorest will face the heaviest burden. Mr. Mayor, last month, the Chancellor promised a rise of 4.4% in council spending power. But what he forgot to mention, that more than half of that relies on a council taxpayer forced to pay 3% extra in social care precept. At the general election last year, the Conservative Party manifesto pledged not to increase income tax, national insurance or VAT across this parliament. But to compensate for that and balance the books, local authorities are being used to dish out government cuts. Mr. Mayor, this is the 6th consecutive year of council tax increases, taking us well above the rate of inflation. Mr. Mayor, after losing 60 pence in every single pound from local government funding, where authorities like Wigan had to cut £160 million from its budgets, it's unfair on local authorities to fund adult social care by raising more money through council tax. Social care is chronically underfunded and is under additional pressures due to this pandemic. And year-on-year council tax increment is not the answer to long-term pressures in the sector. By doing this, government has forced local authorities to generate different amounts of money in different parts of the country, bearing no relevance to local need or urgency. Mr. Mayor, where Wigan Council will raise £1, affluent Richmond will raise double the amount, putting authorities like ours at a great disadvantage to start with. Mr. Mayor, council tax is a regressive tax that hits the working poor the hardest, raises least in the poorest areas, and as a result, deepens inequalities in health and wealth. Unfortunately, areas with low tax base tend to have a relatively greater need. Where you live has a big impact on the quality of care your council can afford to provide. Mr. Mayor, this government is using councils and council tax as the vehicle to take more money from poorest families in Britain. An extra meal from someone in Tilsley, a week's rent from someone in Westley, and another heating bill from someone in Atherton in the middle of this pandemic. I hope this is not what government means by levelling up. Mr. Mayor, the care sector finds itself in a vicious cycle with a growing funding crisis and a complete absence of national strategy. The level of unmet need in the system has increased. The pressure on unpaid carers has grown stronger. The supply of care providers has diminished. the strain on the workforce continues, and the stability of the care market has worsened. And all of this has put more and more pressure on our National Health Service, and it will be the older and disabled people, their families and their carers, who will, as ever, pay the biggest price. Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, the government's response so far has been to make life even harder for this sector. What a thanks to our staff, carers and social workers. Mr. Mayor, we are not alone. The funding announced by Chancellor has been criticised across the board. Conservative-controlled Local Government Association, Age UK, Charity Coalition, Care and Support Alliance, King's Fund and unions calling this approach fragmented, short-term and decidedly reckless. Mr. Mayor, when I stood on this floor in March this year, we presented a balanced, no-cuts budget with council tax frozen for a consecutive 7th year. And since March, we have been proactive and robust in our response to COVID. We had already procured and distributed the PPE to our care homes when the government was still reticent to call this a pandemic. I am glad to say that 44 out of 52 of our care homes are COVID-free at the moment. Our adult social care budget is still balanced. But be in no doubt, this pandemic and its aftershocks will affect all our sectors, but particularly our care sector. Mr. Mayor, Wigan has the largest ageing population in Greater Manchester, and that will be challenging to our capacity and finances in the long term. Thousands of elderly and ill people depend on us to look after them. And Mr. Mayor, these people are not just numbers. They are families, parents, and grandparents of people we are privileged to serve. So, Mr. Mayor, we call on this government to properly invest in the adult social care. Give local government the ability to pay for higher costs, tackle the workforce crisis. We need a long-term sustainable solution for the sector coming from the government funding and not from the poorest in our society. And finally, Mr. Mayor, we urge the government to not only build back better, but to also build back fairer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is the motion seconded?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Do you wish to speak there?
No, reserve the right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Any other members wish to speak on the motion? I've already got Councillor Winstanley. You're on, Councillor, I can see you.
Oh, right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to make sure I got the all clear. I'm not surprised Councillor Smith has reserved his right to come back later, so I've no doubt I know what he's going to say. But I wouldn't totally disagree with what Councillor Rahman had to say. I am not a big fan of using council tax to fund short-term gaps, because I do think that council tax does fall on the most vulnerable in society and those on fixed incomes. And for those members that have been around for a long time, that is a position I have constantly had whilst I've been on the council. And actually, that's why I've constantly opposed council tax rises that this council has imposed on the most vulnerable and those who can least afford it. And I know Councillor Rahman wasn't around at the time, but I've got some figures here going back to 1997, which, if those of you that are old enough can remember those glory days of the Blair years and the Brown years, when the tax were flowing, the income was coming in, we had light touch on banks, we had less regulation. Oh, what a time it was. But what happened in Wigan? I'll tell you what happened in Wigan. We had massive council tax rises. So in 1997, when this Blairite government took over, we had a council tax on a banded property of £747. By the time they left office in 2010, it was £1,388, nearly double. So that's what we did to the most vulnerable in society in Wigan. We doubled the council tax. Look at some of those increases: 6%, 3%, 7%, 8%, 8%, 5%, 8%. We have seen it absolutely rip. Now, let's not also forget that since 2010 to now, that same council tax has risen by about £300. And you know what? It would have risen even less if King of the North, Mayor Burnham, hadn't kept putting council tax up every single year. Did we hear anything from the Labour Party about that when he was doing it? Not a jot, not a whimper of protest about him. And we got precious little to see from that. Now, this government has committed to looking at social care funding. I believe that that is something that we should do. I believe that we should have a Royal Commission on that. We need to get that sorted out. It needs to be fair. It needs to be sustainable going forward. This isn't an easy situation. If it was easy, then surely that wonderful reforming Labour government that we had from 1997 that bankrupted the country would have sorted it out. Surely the Secretary of State for Health, Andy Burnham, would have sorted it out. We know it's difficult. We know it's a thorny issue, but this government is committed to sorting it out. I do agree with the premise that we shouldn't be funding this short term by council tax increases. However, despite the rhetoric I'm going to hear tonight, I will be supporting the motion. So it'll be despite what they say, not because of it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I'll now move on to Councillor Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Councillor Winstanley tells us about Wigan Council raising the council tax by huge amounts to the extent that we have the lowest council tax in Greater Manchester and one of the lowest council taxes in the north of England. So the Labour Council in Wigan ensure that our people have one of the lowest council taxes in the north of England. He tells us that the government are going to address the issue of the funding of social care. And in fact, Boris Johnson said he was going to do it. But in actual fact, in March 2017, Theresa May said the Conservative government were going to launch a green paper on social care. It's been postponed 5 times. So in 2017, they were going to address the issue of funding of social care. And we're now at the end of 2020, going into 2021, and 4 years later, we've seen absolutely nothing. The Local Government Association identifies that there's probably about a £10 billion gap in social care. That is the need of people who require social care. There is a £10 billion gap in the funding. And this way of seeking council taxpayers to cover that is absolutely appalling. Because what's happening is, and don't forget, the 3% that they're proposing this year for council tax for social care is added on to the previous years we've had of 2 and 3% rises for social care over the years. So there's a significant amount. And why is it unfair? It's unfair because of this. A 3% rise in council tax in Wigan will raise about £3 million. A council tax raise in Surrey of 3% will raise about £24 million. It's absolutely appalling because actually the need is greater here in Wigan because of property prices. The number of self-funders that we have is very low, whereas the number of self-funders in Surrey is extremely high. So what you've got is the areas of greatest need are the areas that can raise the least amount of money, and that is absolutely ridiculous. And to put the burden on council taxpayers in areas like ours with low council tax base, 85% of our houses are in band A and B, compared to Surrey where they're in band G and H. It's absolutely appalling that after 4 years, the Conservative government has not addressed the issue in adult social care. And it's not just in Wigan, it's generally across the whole country. And the media and the press are often highlighting, and everybody is aware of the crisis in adult social care. And the way to address it comes from national government, not from local government levying council tax on their people. So it's about time they did it. So I absolutely support what Councillor Raymond's saying, because it is a real problem that needs addressing. And as we have an ageing population, this is going to be an increasing problem. And actually, the biggest pressure on adult social care budgets isn't the elderly. The pressure on adult social care budgets is by people of working age, people with learning disability, people with mental health problems. And that's increasing. And the answer is not to have local authorities levying council tax to pick up the way that the government have reduced funding for local authorities. This authority's had about a 40% cut in government funding, and it can't expect the people of this borough to pick up the demands of social care by levying council tax every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll now move on to Councillor Gerard. Do you wish to speak on this?
Thanks, Chair. I hope I'll not be as long as Councillor Cunliffe. Councillor Raymond, she failed to say how much she's proposing to raise council tax, but I think Councillor Cunliffe let it out the bag there around about 3%. So tonight, on the most vulnerable people in society, in our society, that's 3% on the council tax.
Point of personal explanation.
1.5% on.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you, Councillor Gerard.
The point of personal explanation is I am not. I mean, the budget has not been done and won't be done till March. It's the government that have said councils can raise council tax by 3% for the purpose of adult social care. It's the government that have said that. They have said that councils can raise council tax by 3% this next year for the purpose of addressing social care and ring fence to adult social care. That's what I was saying. That was the 3% I was talking about.
All right, thank you, Councillor Cunliffe. Now back to Councillor Gerard.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Cunliffe, for the point of explanation. So on that basis then, considering last year we was allowed to put up the rent 2% last year on council houses, it looks like we're going for 3% this year for the maximum on social care. Now, like I've just said tonight, we've raised 1.5% on rent, and looking at it, maybe 3% on council tax. In the midst of this pandemic, when people don't know where the next dollar's coming from, this is totally wrong. We're paying out of our council tax now around about £15 per household to Andy Burnham, Greater Manchester. I suggest that we should call on him, because there was a lot of calling on the government in Councillor Raymond's speech to call on the government. We should call on Mayor Burnham to reduce this preset by 3% that we pay to him every year, and should do for the next 2 years until we're out of this, because these pie in the sky plans what he's got for Greater Manchester does not affect towns such as Atherton. If we keep paying that and keep adding all these expenses onto people, people are going to suffer. We need to look at where we can cut this, not just in Wigan as a borough, but in Greater Manchester as a whole. And I would suggest that we call on Councillor Mayor Burnham to cut this mayor preset by £5 per household per year, and put that money into the adult social care, not just in Wigan, but in all boroughs in Greater Manchester. That to me will be the more sensible idea. Now, I don't know what other people would think about that, but to me, we just can't keep banding money out of our borough into other parts of Greater Manchester and then asking for more money as well. It's just not fair. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor. We'll now move on to Councillor Brearley. Would you like to speak on this matter, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Gerard there. You know, they've let it out the bag 3%. Well, 3% of the council tax raised is £3 million. Because when I was on audit, it was £110 million raised by council tax. That was a few years ago. But working on them figures, it's an extra £3 million. Now, we've just had figures being given to us in the Treasurer report that we are investing £130 million, and we're lending 5 other equivalent of 25 million pounds. But why don't we stop lending the money to them, top up this loss of income to the underpaid people on the incur, which I think is a bit below the belt by Councillor Raymond, to bring in that they're suffering to get their way of this extra pay rise. Now, there's other ways we can save money. I'm an elected councillor on the basic allowance, and I probably do a lot more work than possibly as a lot of people in this ward. Now, let's have a look at our cabinet. The extra money what is paid to them for doing.
Councillor, we're not really discussing.
So
the motion doesn't discuss cabinet's remunerations.
Oh, hang on, Mr. Mayor. Aren't we talking about raising the council tax by 3% to pay for social care?
No, Councillor. The government have said that
why are you pulling me up again?
I'm explaining, Councillor, that you're going off the point. The government says we can raise it by 3%. It doesn't mean say we are, but that's what they said they can do. And that money is ring-fenced for social care.
Well, let's ring-fence this extra money that we give to this cabinet committee. 300,000 take everybody back to the basic
but that would be a separate issue, Councillor.
No, it would source out putting the council tax.
But this motion 3%. Doesn't discuss that at all, Councillor. No matter what you put about councillors' allowances, won't affect this motion. I'm just going to have to ask you to try and stick to the point, please.
The motion says you want to raise the council tax by 3%, generating money.
No, it doesn't, Councillor.
Well, that's what you just said to me.
It's asking for the government to reconsider its proposals and not raise it by 3%, but fund it by other means. That's what we're discussing.
Well, that's what it comes across to me.
I shall.
Councillor,
I'll give you a moment to reflect on it by going on to the councillor. I'll give you a moment to reflect on it. I'll talk to the other. We'll let the other councillor speak who's in line, and then I'll come back to you. Okay. Councillor Maiden, would you like to speak on this matter, please?
Mr. Mayor, I came late without speaking on this. Everything's been covered really, mainly by Councillor Gerard. I think that was a great point he made, and I'd back him if he ever wanted to put that forward. So I've got nothing to say, Mr. Mayor. Everybody's covered it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, I have no one else, so we're back to Councillor Brealey.
Right, Mr. Mayor. If Councillor Gerard is talking about the budget by Mr. Mayor, right?
And a point of explanation was given. And a point of explanation was given to him by Councillor Cunliffe, which he accepted. Didn't he?
Mr. Mayor, it just seems that every avenue when I speak, and I'm talking about the extortion monies, what's being paid to Labour councillors, you cut me off.
Councillor, we're not discussing the extortionate amount of money paid to Labour councillors. No. We're talking about a motion here about how the government funds social care sector.
Yeah, stopping it being put on
I'm just asking you to stick on that point, please. On the motion.
Well, there's other ways of doing it, isn't there?
Yes, and that's what the motion says. They should reconsider the proposals.
Yeah, by looking at other ways of stopping 3% on our council tax.
They're not putting 3%. The government says we can, should we wish, put 3% on council tax, and that will be ring fenced for social care.
I've been a councillor a long time, and the government never puts their council tax up. It's always the Labour group or the Mr. Moore, Andy Burnham. I withdraw. Bye.
Have you? Right. I have no one else to speak on this. So, Councillor Smith, do you wish to speak? Do you wish to sum up on this? You reserve your right to speak.
I'll reserve the right to speak, but I'll try and comment on those comments that are worth commenting on, I think. Councillor Winstanley started off with an interesting thing. He said he knew what I was going to say, which actually was more than I did, because the speech I prepared, actually, Councillor Raymond put everything over. So I was actually, hadn't got a speech, but I was interested that, you know, Michael was consistent in the sense he's never in favour of any council tax rises. He did go back into some prehistory of the council. If he'd gone earlier times when we had terms of governments, I'm sure you'd find equally increased in rent. But of course, what he forgets is that who invented the council tax? It was Michael Heseltine, because the poll tax was even worse. And people welcomed the council tax because it was actually, as I say, not as bad as the poll tax. But the point is, it's actually been frozen since then. All properties are still valued as though they were 1991. Now, can you imagine that? How many years have gone past, new houses built, new facilities, and somebody has a wonderful job of saying, well, if this house had been built in 1991, what would it be worth? And therefore, what council tax band it goes in. And when we were raising council tax, just a reminder, Councillor Winston has forgotten, there was a very comprehensive benefit system around council tax. The first thing the government did, the coalition government as it was in 2010, was change that. They altered and reduced very much the amount of benefit that came up, which made the tax much more aggressive than it had been before. But we were trying to talk, Councillor Raymond, about the proposal in the government spending review, recognising the need to spend more money on adult social care, but not willing to put any central government money through, but to raise it all from council tax. My colleagues, Councillor Raymond and Councillor Cunliffe, gave very clear examples of why that is unfair. We've got more properties in those lower bands in Wigan than in many other areas, and therefore whatever percentage we put on, we get a lower figure. And of course, it isn't related to need. The fact that you've got a high or a low council tax base doesn't mean you need the money or you do need the money. There's no relationship with that. And I think what's been proven over the last 9 months, and I'm not obviously blaming the government in one sense, but the impact of COVID has shown that actually the health inequalities in this country are much deeper than they are in many others. And so the evidence, I think, that is coming out now, so Michael Marmot's wrote some stuff in the papers earlier this week to say that very clearly the problems with COVID, the number of people who died, the number who became ill, were very much linked to inequalities, people on low incomes and so on. So that has been the way forward. And, you know, social care is underfunded. It's been underfunded for a while. I think the LGA reckon overall 3 billion is the amount of money that's underfunded. And the crazy thing is, Mr. Mayor, that underfunding social care is a big cost on the NHS, because if people can't get the support they need in their homes through social care, then where do they turn to? They turn to the NHS. And again, I read this week that about up to half the increase in visits to A&E over the last few years have been caused by the reductions in social care budgets. The fact that people can't get the treatment, therefore they're going off to A&E, blocking A&E and causing problems there. So it's a cost to the NHS. So for the government, actually, it's a short-sighted issue. If they don't adequately fund social care, they end up paying probably more through the NHS. I think we've covered the points about the government putting it. Councillor Gerard's point, 3% is would be a big increase in council tax, but it's the real option. It's not banning the figures around. Where would we find the amount of money necessary to provide the care that people in this borough need if we don't raise it through the thing? And they call it a social care precept.
Councillor Smith, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid your time's up.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Raymond, I now invite you to sum up on the motion. You're muted, Councillor. I can't hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Smith and Councillor Cunliffe have summed it up very eloquently. So thank you.
All right. Can I now put the report to the vote? Can all those against the approval of the motion please show in the chat facility? I have 4 councillors against the motion: Councillor Gerard, Councillor Watson, Councillor Collinson and Councillor Maiden. So that motion has been accepted. A motion has been submitted by Councillor Vickers, which is set out on pages 147 and 148 of the agenda. This motion will be referred to Cabinet without debate in accordance with Rule of Procedure 9.7, and the motion will come back to a future meeting of Council for consideration. Well, thank you, and that concludes the business for this evening. All of you have been on your best behaviour. Thank you so much for that. You must be getting on Santa's nice list. So can I take this opportunity to wish you and your families best wishes for Christmas and the new year. Thank you very much and good night.
And you, Mr. Mayor. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.